So I never thought I was going to do a video on this channel about Aaron Hernandez, but with the recent reports coming out about how an evaluation of his brain determined that he had, on a scale of 1 to 4, a grade of 3 when it came to CTE, and that's a lot for somebody that was only 27 years old. That is quite a significant amount of brain damage for such a young man. It felt like this was something that I needed to talk about because it was no surprise to me as this report got out there and it spread throughout the internet that it was going to start being used as a rationale, a justification, an excuse for what he ultimately did. And then it was going to piggyback into being part of a much bigger issue and narrative that people wanted to talk about. That was player safety, CTE, concussions, the NFL, their determination to cover up the significance of the issue over the years and all of this. And I need to address this because I feel like it's very important. First, from the Aaron Hernandez part of this. Thug life born, thug life bred, and when he died, he was thug life dead. Borrowing something from Taz in the professional wrestling world. Some of you may be familiar with that phrase. But ultimately, Aaron Hernandez chose to live a certain type of lifestyle. And ultimately, it got the better of him. He caught himself up in it on his own. And once he even got to college at Florida, and then eventually to the NFL with, of all organizations, the New England Patriots, he continued to exercise poor judgment and decision-making and made the choices that he did and should be 100% held to task for those. And to sit there and try to use CTE, brain damage, as an excuse or a justification or anything else as a defense mechanism for Aaron Hernandez is complete and total crap. It frustrates me so much how in this country in particular that so many different types of people across all different types of spectrums refuse to take personal responsibility for their lives and their decisions. And this, to me, here is a perfect example of not trying to hold somebody ultimately accountable for their decisions. Because look, that excuse of CTE for him being a multi-time convicted murderer doesn't fly with me, period. Because there are a lot of people with Down syndrome as kids and even as adults when they still have the mental capacities of a 6 or 7-year-old that don't go around killing anybody. There are plenty of other people with brain damage that don't go around killing other people. There are plenty of people with dementia and Alzheimer's that don't go around killing other people. If anything, they'd be more so threats to themselves than they would be other people. You know, unless you're Vern Gagne. He forgot to tap, and I forgot what tap means. There are also lots of people with serious, significant mental health issues that manifest in the form of depression and bipolarism and self-mutilation, all these different things, to where those people generally tend to be bigger threats to themselves more so than they are other people. But there are all types of people with mental health history that don't sit there and go out killing multiple people like Aaron Hernandez did. So stop using CTE as an excuse for this stinking murderer. That's exactly what he was, a murderer. He ultimately made decisions in his life to exhibit the type of poor decision-making and engage in reckless behavior that got him locked up for life without the possibility of parole. Don't you dare use CTE as an excuse, because frankly, there have been plenty of other players that have had CTE, even guys like Dave Duerson and Junior Seau. They ultimately committed suicide, but they committed suicide. They were ultimately a bigger threat to themselves than they were other people. Some people are going to bring up the Chris Benoit dynamic and all of this crap. But ultimately, you can sit there and talk about diminished mental capacities and this and that. But ultimately, these people still make choices. And I don't want to hear this crap about, well, because of this damage, they weren't able to make these choices, because there are a lot of other people that face similar issues when it comes to mental health, mental disease, lack of mental capacity that don't do these same things. So give me a break. It makes me sick to see that his money-grabbing ass ex-fiance wants to now sue the NFL and the New England Patriots because she wants to sit there and say basically that they covered up the effects of concussions and lied to him and all this other crap. It's okay when he's making a shit ton of money doing it and you're being a gold digger ass, isn't it? But now all of a sudden when these chickens come to roost, of course, it's a freaking problem. No. I'll put it this way again. I've used this example before and I will continue to use this example. If you cannot watch football, one game, and determine that there are major physical risks associated with the game, then you are stupid. And there are no happy pills that are going to fix that level of stupid. If you don't think months and then years of playing said game that is clearly dangerous to everybody that has eyeballs, again, you can't fix that level of stupid. And I think about my grandmother, Lord rest her soul, immigrated here from Germany in the early 50s, learned how to speak the English language by reading my dad's and my aunt and uncle's textbooks from school. She lived in Germany during the Nazi era. She lived in Germany during World War II. She dealt with starvation, all these other things, the hyperinflation in the economy in the late 20s, the depression that was worldwide in the 30s that really hit Germany hard. She had two brothers, Reinhold and Walter, that died in World War II fighting for the Germans. Her husband, my grandpa Oscar, he fought in World War II and came back home and was never the same and ultimately drunk himself to death and died in 1970 at the age of 49. Why am I telling you all this family history? The point I'm getting at here is this woman that saw so many of these other things that didn't know the first thing about sports knew damn well good enough that football was a dangerous game to where she would tell me, I don't want you playing football, Jeffrey, because it is too dangerous. You could get really hurt and someday you could have some bigger issues down the road. This was not some doctor. This was not some scientist. This was my Grandma Maria. And Lord rest her soul, the greatest woman I've ever known and will ever know. If she was smart enough to clearly see that football was a dangerous game, then I feel no sympathy for anybody else that is either too blinded by it or too stupid to realize that it is. And we all know it is. You can't sit there and make the decision to play and then years later be mad about the fact that now the piper is time for it to be paid. The chickens have come home to roost. And all of these guys that have made money and made a legacy, made a fortune, playing football over the years, carried that over post-football life and so on. Now all of a sudden they have these issues with dementia or this or that or everything else. They want to be mad because people lied to them. They said they didn't have the fact. You know what? If you were that stupid to where you were that easily fooled, that easily lied to, and that stupid where you couldn't determine what your eyes could clearly tell you, ding dong, dumb dicks, we got a problem here, then I feel no sympathy for you whatsoever. It is just like this. After all these years, I still smoke. It's terrible for me. Everybody knows it. I know it. Yet I have still made the decision to do it, like we do with drinking alcohol or engaging in recreational activities or eating fatty chemical-laced foods and so many other things that we do as human beings. We know they're bad for us. Is it ultimately the fault of the company that makes this dangerous, deadly, addictive product if I continue to smoke and someday experience health issues that come out of it? You could say maybe in part, but no, ultimately it is my fault because I have made the stupid decision to engage in the behavior and continue to do so. I'm not about to sit there and sue the goddamn tobacco company if I got sick someday because of my years of engaging in partaking in the product. Because nobody forced me to. I made the choice. And when it comes down to playing football, nobody forces you to. Even if you want to say overbearing parents force you to. At some point in time, you grow a set, you become an adult, and you no longer have to if you don't want to. It's ridiculous to sit there and say the NFL and the Patriots lied about this. They didn't lie about anything that matters. Yes, the NFL is clearly engaged in cover-up activities to try and diminish studies on this issue, try to diminish the science, try to excuse it, try to distract from it. They've engaged in a cover-up operation, there's no question. But the reason I say it doesn't really matter is because people should know, and people do know. This is one of these instances where we really don't need science to tell us the degree, the length, or severity of the issues that could potentially arise out of playing football. And even in that case, there are plenty of other people that have played football throughout their lives that still live on into their 70s and their 80s and their 90s, and sometimes they experience issues and sometimes they really didn't. There's no guarantee. This is about risk-reward. Does the risk outweigh the reward? And for a guy like Aaron Hernandez, football is not what killed him. Living that thug life and not separating himself from that and making poor decisions is what ultimately killed him, what ultimately led him to most likely kill himself, combined with potentially being torn about his sexuality, the thought of being locked up in prison for life, not being able to see his kid, all of these factors. But we're going to blame the NFL and blame the New England Patriots. Give me a break, you money-grabbing, gold-digging bitch. And furthermore, even if you were successful in being able to sue the NFL and the Patriots and get money, shouldn't his murder victims like Odin Lloyd's family and the others be able to get all of that money? Shouldn't they be able to? I'm just saying. It would seem fair. It would seem just. Because ultimately, those are the real victims there. Are they not? But again, these people that are going to sit there and try to make this into a bigger issue, try to make it part of a bigger thing, it comes down to a lack of common sense and personal responsibility. Do not tell me, after years of playing football, how you wish you never had. Bullshit. Do not sit there and try to make me feel sorry for these guys who ultimately made the decisions that they made to play an inherently dangerous sport that they had to know well in advance that it was. And don't tell me about guys in the 40s, 50s, and 60s didn't know better. Bull. If you didn't have enough brain matter in the first place or enough common sense to see that there could be some real risk or issues with playing this sport, then I don't know what the hell to tell you. You don't need the science to tell you this is a dangerous game. And what I will not stand for is people trying to excuse people's bad behavior based off of the damage that was incurred during their time playing in the NFL. Again, there are lots of people with mental health issues, lots of people with dementia and Alzheimer's, lots of people with other issues, all these people that suffer from Down syndrome and other things where they have diminished mental capacities. They don't go around killing other people. You have to call Aaron Hernandez for what Aaron Hernandez was. He was a very talented, very troubled young man who took his life down a very dark path, had so many other opportunities that so many other young men of all shapes, sizes, and colors and backgrounds in this country could only dream of having, and he ultimately pissed it down his leg, and now he is R.I.P. dead and buried. And I come back to what I said before. Ultimately, this is about thug life born, thug life bred, and when he died, he was thug life dead. There's a reason that certain communities celebrate OGs, because there's not a lot of them, and there's a reason there's not a lot of them, because the life ultimately gets to a lot of them. And the life got to Aaron Hernandez, and the reason the life got to Aaron Hernandez is because Aaron Hernandez let the life get to him, and it ultimately led to his death. Period. It's not the NFL's fault. It's not the New England Patriots' fault. It's not Bill Belichick's fault. It is not Roger Goodell's fault. It is not Urban Meyer's fault at Florida. It's not his high school coaches. It's not anybody else, but ultimately Aaron Hernandez's fault that he was a convicted murderer that got himself into a situation where he was locked up for life, and he ultimately took his own life. Period. Stop using CTE as an excuse for everything, and stop using CTE as an excuse to try and get sympathy for me, and most importantly of all, stop using CTE to try and defend, justify, and excuse what that murderer Aaron Hernandez did, because it's sickening.